Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully we got some Men of War Assault Squad 2 gameplay for you. I've had this video idea in my Google Docs for a couple weeks now. So first off, you've seen the title, you know what this video is about. I'm going to be talking about the general overview of what I learned in History 2210 or 221, also known as Early Western Civ. This is like I want to say a sophomore level course, and I took it as a junior because I didn't take it at my community college, so I'm having to take this remedial class to make up for the fact that I didn't take it at Wall State when I was an actual underclassman. A couple of housekeeping stuff, just introductory, tell you guys what's been going on with me. Got a job. I'm working, which is awesome. I'm working while going to school during the semester to save up money. Had to enroll in a payment plan instead of paying my tuition altogether because I didn't have the money. And because I was stupid, I didn't enroll for student loans this year. So I applied for student loans, but they don't count until next year, the 2023-2024 school year, where I'll be a senior, and then the year after that I'll be a postgraduate, hopefully. I am taking 2 history classes, both the same professor I had for Early Western Civ. I'm taking Modern Western Civ and Medieval History, which is a module of Early Western Civilization, but spread out over an entire semester. And then I'm taking a political science course online as an elective, just to fill out my schedule. And then I'm taking a advanced education class on implementing technology in the classroom. Very light schedule, like literally 3 classes a week and 1 class online versus the 5 classes I had a week, and we had to meet 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 times a week, I want to say, yeah, something like that. Last semester, so I literally had like 2 classes every day, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then I had 1 class Tuesday. So yeah, that was stressful, but hopefully I'll do better this semester. So that's just what's been going on with me. Let me sort of just give you the rundown of what happened in the module. So or the semester, excuse me. So, Early Western Civ, Early Western Civilization covers the Greco-Persian times, so Greece, Athens, and Persia. And then the second module is the Roman times, the Roman Empire, the Roman democracy, and then going back into the Roman Empire. And then the third module is medieval society. This course, it was a history course combined with a early European geography course and a Western literature course, sort of all rolled into one. So literature, geography, and history. I had to read 3 books for this class. There was Symposium by Plato was the first one, and then Agricola and Germania by Tacitus, and then the final one was Song of the Cid, and I can't remember the author of that one. Symposium was obviously Greco, Plato was Greek, and then Agricola and Germania is Roman, and then the Song of the Cid, or the Poem of the Cid, is medieval. So yeah, I'm not going to get into like the plots of the books because, well, this is a history course. I sort of just want to like read through some of the stuff that I wrote down. So the lectures of this course were very note intensive. There wasn't a lot of pausing. There wasn't a lot of slides. You didn't write down stuff you saw on a board like you saw with most things. The professor, actually my professor was a doctor, she was a doctor. So the doctor would lecture, and you would write notes about what she was lecturing about. So the first day, we basically went over the basics of Western civilization. Because if we want to talk about early and modern Western civilization, we have to talk about Western civilization as a whole. And basically, we just wrote down bullet points, emphasis on individual freedoms, the ruling of oneself. Monarchies have kings and queens. Spain, Dutch, and Belgium are all monarchies, usually losing all power. Western civilization limits religion, no God in politics. The West developed philosophical freedom to investigate on your own, think for yourself. West valued science, technology, evidence, innovation, all causing better health. And the widespread politics was invented in the West, and politics were the expressions of individual freedoms and beliefs. So these were all sort of the bullet points. Like this was the main foundation for what we were going to cover. So monarchies, democracies, empires, kings, queens, emperors, the whole 9 yards and then some. The first sort of society in Western civilization was the Minoan Crete society from 3000 BCE to 1500 BCE, and a lot of the, I guess, tribal villages were just that, tribal. We're talking about people who lived in huts and caves and stuff, and the Minoan Cretes, they were the first society to build houses. The Minoan society of Crete, so the island is called Crete, and the race that lived on Crete is called Minoan. Minoan Greek or Minoan Crete, what have you. They're Minoans. And so Crete sits in the Afro-Eurasia Gulf, the Gulf surrounded by Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. And it's a tiny little island, and it was discovered by a British archaeologist named Arthur Evans in the 1800s, so the 19th century, around about the 19th century, circa. And he got the name Minoan from King Minos, who was a fictional hero, I guess, king, in Minoan folklore. And the thing about the thing that's ironic about this is the Crete society, the Minoans, they were ironically a matriarchy, meaning women were the higher class. Now, men had rights and they had place in society, but women had to deal with the administrative roles. They had to deal with the logistics, the administrative, the secretarial work. And so because of that, women were seen as more important than men in that society. This was around this was the Bronze Age, which was 3000 to 1200 BCE. So the Minoan Crete lasted for 300 years of the first 300 years of the Iron Age, which is 1200 to 1500 BCE. They also lasted all through the Bronze Age of 3000 to 3000 to 1200 BCE. So the Bronze Age was an age of warfare. City-states started, constantly fought to control resources, but the Minoans didn't do that. They were an agricultural society. They got power through, I guess, landowning and farming and trading and all that stuff. Until the Greeks came along, the Mycenaeans is what they were known as, and there was a sect of Mycenae, which became known as Athens, where we get the two Greco nations of Athens and Sparta. So skipping over here a little bit, basically there was a Greek war to go after women, essentially, and basically the early, Mycenaean Greeks, they were incredibly sexist, and they believed that owning women was a sign of power, and if you had multiple wives, you were powerful, and even like by the established Greco standards like the Athenians and the Spartans, they would look at the Mycenaeans and go, dang, dude, we were messed up. Which goes to show that nothing has changed in the multiple thousand-year history of Western civilization. We constantly look back on history and go, dang, man, really? Are you kidding? Fellow example of that is the Spartans. The doctor, my professor, wrote a bunch of stuff about the Spartans, or said a bunch of stuff about the Spartans. So I basically, from what I gathered, Spartans were sort of like the first fascists in Western history. They were about to be destroyed by a country called Messenia. As a result, they put the state over individual freedom, fear, fascism. Sparta enslaved Messenians as revenge. State-owned slaves became helots, so the Messenians were known as helots. And Sparta would kill helots to keep them docile. So when a graduating agoge, which is their word for younger Spartans, when an agoge would turn 21, they would hand him a spear and say, go and kill a helot up in the mountains, and come back with his head, and you will graduate from Laconian to homoioi, meaning Spartan to upper class Spartan. So there were three categories. You had the homoioi, the Laconians, and the helots. The homoioi were the high-class aristocratic Spartans. The Laconians were the lower-class Spartans. The helots were the slaves, and the agoge were the women and children. They made huts. They didn't build houses like the Athenians did. The Spartans believed wealth was the root of all strife. Didn't compete in games where there were cash prizes. I mean, there's some stuff in here that it's like I'm afraid if I say some of this stuff that I had to study, I'm gonna get demonetized. But basically, they were imagine the Klingons from Star Trek on steroids. That's basically the Laconians. The 300 make Worf look like, I guess Wesley Crusher or whatever. I don't know. So that's sort of Sparta in a nutshell. We talked about Athens. We talked about Greece. Here's something interesting. So Macedonia invades Greece and colonizes it 313 BCE. BCE stands for before Common Era. As a result, only men were considered citizens in Greece. Incredibly patriarchal. Used religion to support social roles. Greeks developed the four elemental forces of nature to determine the sex of a baby. So earth and fire were considered male, and wind and water were considered female. Lack of heat formed a girl, and presence of heat formed a boy. That's what the Greeks believed. And Aristotle, who was a private teacher to Alexander the Great, the son of King Philip of Macedonia, said that Aristotle said that women were defective males, which is that's yikes from the leading philosopher of the time. So that's as far as I'm going to go into that. The last thing I think we went over, the last two things we went over were like the general upbringing of Greeks under Macedonian rule to nurture men, because men were more privileged than women. They had role models and heroes. They displayed something known as erit, which is excellence. Erit comes from Ares, the Greek god of war, and the only way to achieve erit was through training. So what you would do is you would actually go to a gymnasium, like a college recreational gym, and on one floor you'd have where they worked out, and on the other floor you'd have studies and stuff. So you would train your body, train your voice, train your mind. Oh, and you would actually be encouraged to engage in relationships. So this is something that I thought was interesting, and it sort of debunks the whole religion formed Western civilization, and people use that to justify their bigotry and homophobia. Literally, homosexuality has been around longer than Christianity, than religion. I mean, well, not religion, because there's, Judaism. But Christianity was formed in the 1st century, so that's 0 to 100 CE. And same-sex couples have been around since at least circa 400 BCE. That's the last date I have in this before I talk about this, or before this is written down. So the Greeks viewed same-sex couples as beginning at the gym, didn't disapprove of gay relationships as long as they were mutually loving. So the only way to be in a true relationship is if you and your partner love each other equally. And gay relationships were common amongst rich people, typically between older men and younger boys. The younger was known as eromenos, and the older was Erastes, I believe, and I'm probably mispronouncing that. Yeah, so basically, being gay was seen as the ultimate sign of masculinity. It was basically like, I don't need a woman to be happy. And this is something I thought was funny. Just a little bonus thing. So Plato isn't actually Plato's real name. We actually don't know Plato's real name. But Plato is Greek for broad-shouldered, which in modern English vernacular we would say big man or big guy. So we've literally been calling the one of the leading philosophers of Western civilization as a big guy for all of eternity, which is arguably one of the biggest memes in history since Canon in D Major by Pachelbel. So that's the Greeks. After that, we get to Alexander the Great, and then we get into the Roman Empire. There's nothing really here during this time, during Alexander the Great's reign over pretty much all of the world at that point. One of Alexander's former friends said, and I quote, "Everything you have achieved, your father made possible." Talking about King Philip. King Philip was Alexander the Great's father. And as a result, Alexander decided to skewer this man with a 14-foot spear, which seems kind of excessive, not gonna lie. But after Alexander the Great, we got into the Roman times. Romans invented concrete and roads, and that was cool. So basically, Rome started out as a republic, and it was a monarch. Then it became a republic. Then it became an empire, and then it fell. Rome has always been around. It's still around to this day. We have the Holy Roman Empire, the Vatican City, in Italy. So Rome has really never gone away. Rome is the last sort of thing humanity has to the ancient civilizations. So there were a ton of of stuff about the Roman government. So, in 509 BCE, I believe it was, the Cynics overthrew the Rex and formed the Republic. The Cynics is Senate, and the Rex is the king of Rome. The Cynics overthrew the Rex, meaning the Senate overthrew the king, and formed the Republic, which lasted for 500 years. So from 500 to the 1st century CE, 500 BCE to 1st century CE, Senate governed war, diplomacy, law, 300 members. Senators could not engage in commerce to prevent corruption. Money came from land owning, and you were not elected by the citizens, you were elected by predecessors, and position was permanent until death, meaning you were elected by people who were older in the Senate. So the Senate was the first branch of government. Then you had the plebeian assembly, which represent the middle class, and they were sort of like the House of Representatives, and that's where we get the word pleb from. Then you have the consuls, and the consuls were basically the leaders of Rome. They were the presidents of Rome, and then the praetors were like the Supreme Court justices, the praetors. Then the censors were, I guess, the general happenings of the government, like they handled infrastructure of the government and all that stuff. And then finally the Pontifex Maximus, or the Pope, which was the religious politician, the chaplain of the government. So you have the Senate, the plebeian assembly, the consul, the praetor, the censor, and the Pope. Oh, and the tribune of the plebs, which were the head of the plebeian assembly. And I think there was also another branch as well called the the priestesses of Vestus, also known as the Vestal Virgins, i.e. nuns. Yeah, that's basically the end of the Roman government, how the Roman government worked. Oh, this is something funny. So Rome was built on a type of early capitalism known as the patron-client system, which was a mutual transactional relationship between two men. Unfortunately, and I know this is a bummer, it was not sexual, at which point I almost got kicked out of the class permanently for going, dang it, frick, and making a bunch of freshmen almost pee themselves. So that was funny, but also scary. Roman military, Punic Wars. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff in here. I'm just going through my stuff here. Basically, the Roman, what became the established Roman Republic, ended with the Roman Republic being torn in two. There was the Byzantine Empire, which was the the Eastern Roman Empire became the Byzantine Empire, which got taken over by the Turks. And then the Western Roman Empire became like Germany and Italy and Spain and all that stuff. So yeah, so from there we get into the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages was formed by three groups of people. The triad of medieval society. There was those who work, those who pray, and those who fight. So your workers were your peasants, your serfs, your professors, your craftsmen, your merchants, and then those who pray, your monks, your friars, your knights, your abbots and abbesses, your priests, bishops, archbishops, cardinals, pope, and then those who fight, the king, the emperor, dukes, counts, earls, viscounts, barons, lords, and knights. Fun fact, lords actually had more power. So give you an idea of structure of local medieval politics. So lords actually had more power than the king or queen, because a kingdom or queendom was made up of multiple villages in said kingdom or queendom. And those villages had lords. So, if the king or queen wanted to remain ruler of those villages in his or her king or queendom, they had to make favor with the local lords of the villages. You know, that would sort of be like the state governor trying to make amends with like the mayors of all of the counties of the state or whatever in order to have a state. So lords let kings and queens be kings and queens. Let's see here. The first so medieval society was founded on religion. You had Muslims. Islam was the first major religion. Middle Ages. Before that, you had Jews during the Roman times. And then the Muslims took over. Then the Christians took over. And Christians and Muslims did not like each other. Christians and Jews tolerated each other. Jews and Muslims tolerated each other. But Muslims and Christians hated each other. So, let's see here. Oh, yeah. So, it is believed that early Western civilization ended in 1492 when Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered North America. That was actually he discovered Central America. He landed in the Caribbeans. The Pilgrims and Puritans didn't land until 100 years afterwards in the 1600s. They discovered or rediscovered North America from the Vikings. Basically, Christopher Columbus asked the Queen and King of Spain for money to sail to the Western Hemisphere because he wanted to go to India and sail all around the world. But he was turned down because he was a horrible cartographer, a horrible map drawer. So basically, give you an idea of how bad he was off by like 4 times the distance. So by his measurements, the distance between Cookeville, Tennessee and Tokyo, Japan would be the same distance between Nashville, Tennessee and Chattanooga. That's how off Christopher Columbus was. Queen Isabel of Castile, aka Western Spain, and King Fernando of Aragon of Eastern Spain said, nah, fam, we ain't doing this, my guy. Yeah, that was sort of very funny, because Chris Columbus was a doofus, but eventually he got the money somehow, and of course, literally, the rest is history, no pun intended. A big thing in medieval society, obviously, was feudalism, a system of political organization where lords are the ones who exercise authority, maintain control by giving protection to men who give them service and loyalty in return, which mirrors the patron-client system from the Roman times. So you had 2 types of people. You know, just like Rome, you had the givers and the receivers. The givers were the clients and the receivers were the patrons. In medieval society, the givers were the vassals and the receivers were the lords. So vassals gave something known as fealty to lords. Basically loyalty, you know, I will serve God, I will serve my country, and this, that, and the other. They gave that to their lords, and lords in return would give them fiefs, annual fiefs. So whether it be land, horses, free food, socialism. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. That was basically it for medieval society. Here's one. Here's one last thing before I cover the 100 Years' War, which is the last. I believe that's the last. Yeah. Hang on a second. Let me check my notebook here. Yep. The 100 Years' War is the last thing we covered. I'll get to the 100 Years' War in a minute. So I'm currently watching a thing on the History Network called Nightfall because Mark Hamill's in it. 1187, Christians lost Jerusalem in Israel after an 88-year reign in the Middle East to a Muslim general known as Saladin. Approximately 100 years later, in 1291 CE, the city of Acre surrendered to the Muslims, ending Christendom in the Middle East. And that's where Nightfall takes place. And so Nightfall follows the story of the Templars, which were the warrior monks under the Pope, who specialized in banking and finance and all that stuff. They basically went around all of Europe and told those who fight that if you stay on our good side, we'll give you money. And they were like, ooh, okay. So you have the Templars, and then you have the Hospitallers, which is where we get hospitals from. So Hospitallers were, doctors and nurses and that sort of thing. So in 1565, Hospitallers held the island of Malta against 30,000 Muslim crusaders. And there were only 500 knights. 500. That's 5 for every 300. 5 knights for every 300 Muslim crusaders. The knights held off the 30,000 Muslims. In the late 1700s, they stopped branding swords and are now a humanitarian organization. And they're still around to this day. We have medieval knights around to this day. I don't know. I just think that's pretty cool. So then we get into the 100 Years' War. So the 100 Years' War was a war between England and France over territory, trade, and ties. Territory. Feudal entanglements led England and France to claim Gascony, which was a region in southern France. Trade. England only exported wool to northwest France to cloth weavers, and the cloth weavers went on strike against the cloth merchants because, hey, y'all ain't paying us, we ain't slaves, this isn't the United States, my guy, despite the fact that the United States hadn't been discovered yet. As a result, because cloth weavers didn't want to work, England was losing money. And then ties, specifically kinship, noble kinship, the king, the queen, princes, princesses, advisors, ambassadors, the whole 9 yards and then some. French and English aristocrats constantly married each other and were literally cousins of each other, which is bleh. That's disgusting. And this is coming from a hillbilly, so you know that this is bad. 1337, the King of France dies. F's in the chat. His closest male kin was the King of England. King of England claimed the throne of France. French nobility deny the King of England and instead crown a distant French relative, which results in England declaring war on France. At which point we get to the tail of the tape. In the red corner from England with a population of under 5 million. Allied with Burgundy and eastern France, advantage of war not in mainland but having disadvantage of soldiers being far from home and being homesick. England! And their opponent from France with a population of circa 16 million. They are much wealthier, many more exports, allied with Scotland. And they have mounted knights, which, by the way, the mounted knights of France are even better than the knights of the Templar of... Wow, actually the knights of Templar were based in France. So the mounted knights are the best knights in all of Europe. France. So everyone was hearing news of England and France going to war, and the general consensus was, oh dude, England's about to get their butts whipped. And psych, England actually held their own because they had something known as archery, which is where Robin Hood came from. So French had the best cavalry, but English had archers. Basically, French knights would line up and charge headlong into arrows being fired by the British, which would result in British victories in these little battles. The most famous one of these battles, utilizing this strategy, October of 1415, the Battle of Agincourt. King Henry V of England was a very popular king. Took his army into France. His king literally led the army. Draws French within 200 yards. A bunch of the English knights were like, oh God, we're going to die. It's over. We're outnumbered, this, that, and the other. And King Henry V said, well, don't fret, my fellows. And gave the most famous speech ever in the history of political speeches at that time, of that century, the 15th century. And Shakespeare reworked said speech in a play called Henry V, about King Henry V of England. So anyway, French line up and they charge at this barricade of spears made by the English, and the English launched their arrows over this barricade that they made, and they won. And as a result, 5 years later, in 1420, Henry V entered Paris and forces the elderly King of France to sign the Treaty of Troyes, which basically said Henry would marry the Princess of France, and his son would be king, which unfortunately didn't happen because 3 years later, in 1423, he died of dysentery, which is a huge L. Oh, and also he already had a son named Charles. So, infidelity. We get into Joan of Arc. So Joan of Arc, 1450 to 1500s, circa, around that time. She didn't actually live to be 50 years old, but this is around the time of Joan of Arc. She was a mystic, which basically meant that she could see and hear visions of God. And as a result, from saying this, she was put on trial by the English for heresy in 1431. Her name was Jean, but later added d'Arc as her surname, so that's D''ARC. Her age, her class, and her sex are reasons we shouldn't know her, but we do. She claimed visions and voices as a mystic, told her to go to Prince Charles and lead his army and have him crowned King of France. And as a result, in 1431, she was burned at the stake for heresy. She was 19 years old. So Joan of Arc was the last. She was the last crusader, and she was a knight. She sort of had that Samus thing going on from Metroid, where people didn't know that she was a chick. So when she was burned at the stake, they tore all her clothes off to show, hey, she's a woman, which, you'd think, these being godly men, they'd have some class, but then you remember, oh wait, this is the medieval time. And also, to add insult to injury, so Joan of Arc goes on these huge epic campaigns and wins all of this territory for France, and then as soon as she's killed, King Charles secedes territory back to England. So she did all of that for nothing. So the death of Joan was the death of chivalry, and thus the death of what we know as early Western civilization. So Western civilization in Western Europe died with the death of Joan of Arc and Chris Columbus discovering Central America, the Caribbean. And in the East Europe, it fell, Western civilization fell to the Turks from the Ottoman Empire, who invaded the Byzantine Empire and turned the capital of Constantinople into Istanbul, which is now the capital of Turkey. So 1450 was the invention of gunpowder. The French bought gunpowder from the Chinese and were the first to use it because they could afford it from the Chinese. As a result, armies became more professional and centralized under the king. The first modern militaries, the first armies, the first navies, that sort of thing. Central navies, I should say. There's always been navies, from Greco times, and Roman times and stuff, but they weren't centralized. They were basically boat militias. So then, 1453, Rome falls. Byzantine Empire, Eastern Roman Empire, asks for help in defending from the Ottoman Turks. No one showed up. 200,000 Turks to 9,000 Byzantinians in Constantinople. Turks had the largest cannon in the world. The cannon was 26 feet long and shot 1,500-pound balls. And they bombed the city of Constantinople 7 times a day for a week, which resulted in the fall of Constantinople, the fall of the Byzantine Empire, and the end of the Middle Ages. And the last thing that I wrote in here was early Western civilization lasted from 3000 BCE to 1453 CE, 4,453 years. So yeah, that is essentially 15 weeks worth of notes, reading, studying, and everything, and this is a TLDR. This is the too long didn't read, and I've been recording this audio for an hour. No one's probably going to watch this video, and they're going to accuse me of historical revisionism. Hey man, I'm just a student. Take it up with my professor. I'm sorry. Yeah, so this is basically the TLDR of the entirety of early Western civilization. I'm going to try to edit this down. I'm going to try and make this thing, short. There's definitely going to be time chapters in the description because this video is longer than 20 minutes. Yeah, with that, Twitter and Instagram links will be in the description. I'm going to end the video here. I just wanted to make this video because it's something I'm really passionate about. I love history. I'm going to school for history because I want to be a history teacher. So, I've been under a lot of stress as of late, and it's just nice to record something that's that I'm passionate about. So with that, hopefully I can see all of you later, and I will talk to all of you very soon. Goodbye.